I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة on Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, but discussing Sudan. I'm so old, I was in Khartoum on the day that President Numeri was overthrown. There have been a few Numeris since. I've seen them come and go. The history of Sudan is one of colonization and dictatorship, but for very brief interregnum. I interviewed the former dictator, General Bashir, 7 years ago in Khartoum. He promised me that he would not, under any circumstances, stand for re-election for a further term. He promptly broke that promise and then was about to break it all over again. And the people of Sudan had had enough, and they rose up in a huge swelling of popular democracy, protest, demands for the military to demit office and for the people to attain power. They succeeded, and Bashir is now in jail, though I don't know where his money is, and neither do the people of Sudan. But he has been replaced, not by popular power, but by a military transitional council, of which one man is undoubtedly calling the shots. He's called General Hamdan, though nobody knows how he got to be a general, as he has no military training. He has his own army. According to the New York Times, 50,000 fighters in his own militia. He's calling the shots. The uprising of the people of Sudan has been drowned in blood, at least for now, literally drowned in the Nile, with well over 100 protesters murdered, well-attested examples of rape being used as a method of political terror, brutality, torture, all the usual paraphernalia of a military crackdown. The internet has been switched off, an internet which had been key to the communications of the people in the uprising. The television news, never free, is now heavily militarized. The media is under the control of the men in khaki. The question is, on whose behalf are the new junta operating? What are their intentions? Who is behind them? And will the demands for popular power, people power in Sudan, succeed in reviving itself, and will the people be able to realize the dream of popular democracy? I have an audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. So it's time to turn to the distinguished audience. Madame, you have the floor.
Good evening. I'm Sa'ad Abdel Jalil, the president of the Sudan Doctors Union in the UK. I'm here because as a Sudanese woman, I'm very proud of what the people of Sudan have achieved in the non-violent movement, the peaceful resistance. But as a doctor who have been with my colleague always at the front line, driving towards change, we have witnessed the casualties, the injuries, and reported rape cases. And therefore, we have been under a lot of austerity measures ourselves, being shot and killed and detained and arrested like all other people in Sudan. So the question is, and that's open for discussion, if the people of Sudan have led for 6 months a peaceful resistance, and they avoided to be engaged in any army conflict, why we cannot overcome the TMC, the Transitional Military Council, which is a continuation of the same regime, and the militia that is actually should be labeled as a terrorism group, and why the regional and the international forces are not supporting the peaceful resistance toward change?
Well, maybe because they don't want it to be catching in their own countries. how can countries themselves ruled by brutal military dictatorships possibly want people power to come to power in Sudan? That's the answer, isn't it?
I think to some extent, but they have to realize that the stability and the security in Sudan, which is situated in a very important geopolitical area, will have a positive sort of influence. I think that the fight in Sudan is not just for Sudanese people. I think it's a global fight for justice.
Who else would like to respond? Yes, sir.
My name is Jihad Massaman, and I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Exeter.
Welcome.
And thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this show. I'm here as a capacity as a researcher because I've been covering what's happening in Sudan for a while, and that's how I got to know Dr. Sarah. And what I realized is that what's happening in Sudan now is inspiring, that the nonviolent resistance movement is activated again, where you'll find organizers in the streets protecting the neighborhoods and having cohesion with each other. However, what's missing in this is I realized that the international community is not doing enough to pressure regional countries in the region to pressure the TMC to give up power.
I'm touched by your faith in what you call the international community.
I'm touched too. But I mean, we have to use terminology. That's what
a scorpion stings because it's a scorpion. The international community, so-called, betrays the Sudanese revolution because of what it is, because of what the international community is and what the Sudanese revolution is.
Well, I do agree with you, but I'm using terms that they told me to use in academia. International community.
Don't use these things here. As Tony Benn once said, I realized at one point during the Iraq war that I knew one half of the international community because the international community was George Bush and Tony Blair.
That I agree with you. But when I'm talking about forces within the international community, I'm talking about the US, and the UK needs to take a leadership role in pressuring Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the Emirates to force the TMC to give up power.
Who are these regional actors you think that are behind the TMC and the resistance to democracy?
From what I can see, it's the Emirates. Emirates is having a heavy influence. And it's...
But you see, Sudan is an historic, huge, populous, mighty country. The Emirates is a petrol station with a flag. And a yachting marina in Dubai. I can't accept, because I know the Sudanese people so well, that they are going to dance to a tune dictated by a Bedouin prince.
Okay. But then we have to look at the country's interests. The problem is the UAE and these countries is they don't understand if they give us a civilian government power, they're actually going to get their interests achieved. I mean, the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, they're scared that the Muslim Brotherhood would come to power. And that's why they're resisting a civilian power.
Is that what it's about, you think? Fear of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Fear of the Muslim Brotherhood and, of course, regional influence. They're trying to, especially with the Emirates, is trying to enhance its regional influence.
Very interesting.
So if basically they need to understand that a civilian government would address this kind of concerns, and the international community, including the US and Britain, that their concerns with regards to terrorism would be resolved, and immigration would be resolved if they support a civilian government.
The United States and Britain are behind most terrorism in the world. You need to step out of academia, my friends. Let's take the lady behind you.
No worries. Cheers, though.
Hello, good evening or good afternoon. My name is Sama Sidki. I'm a visual artist and an activist and a mother. What I think about this revolution, to be honest with you, I have a kind of different view or perspective from everyone else. I've seen this revolution from the beginning, from 2013, since it started. I believe this revolution has started in 2013 and been stopping and going and stopping and going until now. But unfortunately, I've been watching Sudan since 2003, where a lot of Sudanese people did not know what was happening in Darfur. There was a genocide in Darfur and massacre of a lot of people. The government said that they massacred these people because of religion war, and I don't think it's true, to be honest with you, because I've been doing a lot of research about Sudan. These same people now that massacred people in Darfur are in Khartoum, and they are killing our people again. And the first time, Sudanese people in Khartoum and everywhere did know about it because of media, cut-off media, and then, you know, internet and news. And now again, the world, they know a little bit about Sudan, but a lot of the people don't know where Sudan is and who we are. But I believe the key lies in our hands, the people who are in America, in the Sudanese, in America, in Britain, in Canada. And I'm looking at the problem with a different kind of perspective. Everyone is looking at peace, and I believe in peace, don't get me wrong, but I also believe that we need to think ahead. We need to think 3-4 steps ahead. You know, what if these people doesn't stop killing our people? Because we've seen this same thing before in Darfur. So what if we can actually make a world globing, a warning to people, and we make it different from here? Obviously, the people in Sudan, they're doing their best to fight this regime, but they can't do anymore, because I feel like when I look at them, they're scared, they're lost, they're desperate. They've been living in this regime for so many years, suffering from economic problems, in a country that it doesn't make any sense, because our country is full of goods, but these people have destroyed our goods. But I believe there's hope, there's always hope. Only if, to be honest, we have the right leaders. So I don't know how to end this, but...
That's a good point to end it. Let's take the gentleman along from you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Fadul Dawood. I am a PhD student at Durham University. And I'm actually from Darfur region, where this lady she's just spoken about. And I've witnessed firsthand the atrocities that's committed by the second man in command now in the TMC.
This Hamdan was the butcher of Darfur.
I know what they've committed firsthand since 2003 up to now. But unfortunately, I'm really disappointed in 2015 when the EU tried to do a deal with the Hamdan in order to, they're going to stop smuggling a migrant from Horn of Africa. But they do know all the criminal acts that's being committed in Darfur by these guys, and they do know there is a arrest warrant from the ICC against Omar Bashir and against his Janjaweed and his militia, which is the same guys. But the EU, they turned blind eye and they tried to do a deal. They actually did a deal in 2015, and they support this guy by a lot of money, and they asked him to stop migrant, and we do know what they mean when they said we're going to stop migrants, because they're going to treat them inhumanely, and they do all the things that they're going to do. But the Human Watch, they produce a very good report condemning that agreement between the EU and the Hemeti and the Janjaweed militia. But the EU government, they try to hide that one, and I bet you a lot of haven't heard about that agreement, and they didn't know what that agreement is about. So this gentleman went earlier speaking about the regional governments, they're trying to support the transitional military government. I think those regional governments, they are doing work on behalf of other peoples, namely the Western government, because they really don't need any stable civilian government in Africa or anywhere else. But I think the Sudanese will prevail, and they will get to stop all this. I would call it outside agenda, and we're going to establish our civilian government and civilian rule in Sudan, and we're going to hope and build the government that we're going to hope for.
Let's take the gentleman next to you. Yes, right next to you.
Yeah, my name is Basil Sheikh, and I'm a director in a telecom company. The issue we have is that we living in a dream, I think, and especially in our countries, where we think that we are in control. Or we actually think, our people think that they've actually gained real independence since the colonization left our countries, whole of the Middle East and Africa. And I think that's one of the biggest lies. What happened is the colonization is just still there, present, but under different premises, masks, and mainly with proxies. And that explains the sort of the interference that's happening. So when we ask now, when we talked about Egypt or role of, and why the military council is touring around the Middle East, going to Emirates or going to Saudi, basically this was like instead of directly talking to the United States. So our people need to understand that the governments in Sudan, Sudan is an ex-colonized country. when the British left, how America after the Second World War came to that region by the say of military coups, and this is very important to realize. So the Numeri regime was actually pro-American, but people didn't realize. So they raise all these nationalistic, views and stuff and slogans, but actually they're not nationalistic. And the Bashir regime as well raised the flag of Islam and being the country, but actually it wasn't. And underneath all the policies were actually homogenized by the international community and the American policies of the World Bank, etc., which led Sudan to this dire situation and people going out on the streets. So to be able to fix that situation, people in that country or in each of this country, they need to get hold of their own decisions. And they need to really clear all those people sitting at the top, whether military council or even political parties. Anybody who tries to come with an imported, political agenda from outside should really be rejected. The people should decide for themselves.
Very interesting, yes. Let's take the gentleman in the front row.
Hello, the name is Marwan Mortat. I'm from South Sudan, political commentator from South Sudan, now a separate country from what remains of Sudan. I'm here to show our sympathy. South Sudan stands for the people of Sudan. One reason that South Sudan became independent, contrary to all the views about international interference, is because the history of Sudan is full of two things. One is the militarism, and the other thing is reactionary politics. So Sudan was dominated by very, very reactionary regimes that, unfortunately, they only had 10 years in terms of civilian rule, but the rest of the years since independence, 64 years ago, have been under military rule. Contrary to what was said about Numeri, Numeri came up as a socialist originally, and then changed colors I remember it well. The reason South Sudan fought for independence is because it failed to convince the successive systems in the north that we need to have a pluralistic society that can accommodate different religions, races, languages, and so on. Completely rejected that. And this revolution is a continuation of a Sudanese tradition that goes back many, many decades. There have been 3 revolutions, and this is the 3rd revolution, in 1964, 1985, and now. And the people's aspirations all this time have been to create a new Sudan that is pluralistic, that can accommodate everyone, that is visionary, that is democratic, and every time it has been frustrated. And this is what has happened now. So rather than blame other forces, we must blame the Sudanese leadership. I have total sympathy with all these boys and girls that have been killed in the streets, and there's no blame for any external force except the Sudanese forces. Hemeti, General Hemeti, the general you were talking about, Hamdan, is a creation of the Sudanese system. It's a creation of Bashir. Bashir used him to fight a proxy war against Darfur with horrendous results against our own people in Darfur, where 300,000 have been killed. Previously, of course, there were similar wars in Sudan, in the south, in the name of Islam and so on, where 2 million have perished, resulting into all these disasters. So the tragedy continues to this day. And the only hope for Sudan, and consequently for South Sudan as well, is the success of this revolution. Why are the Arabs involved? Why is Saudi Arabia interested? Simple story. They have the money, and the Sudanese don't have money. They basically are paying for a slave army to fight in Yemen. And that's really the reason why they want to keep Hemeti there. That's why the reason that this Burhan is there. Both of them are a product of the Darfur war, and they're being paid directly by the Saudis to keep the army there.
Gentlemen here.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. My name is Sahal Yusuf Ali. I'm political and social commentator on issues happening in East Africa and the Middle East. I have to highlight something that may be of interest to everybody here and those who might have the chance to view it. The protest wasn't expecting the outcome. They were simply after economic reforms. They were demanding an end to the austerities, the tripling of the commodities prices. They wanted an end to abuse of authority, political repression. They were after things like the limitation of ATM withdrawals. They were also after things like devaluation of their currency. At the time of these protests, the inflation was 70% high. the country was running out its foreign currency. So the unexpected, the unthinkable happened when they saw they had a momentum. The demand is for economic reform shifted and changed to demand is for Bashir to step down. I think they achieved it, but there was a price to pay for that. On the 3rd of this month, June, the sad part of this story was the Khartoum massacre. 100 people have been brutally killed by the Transitional Military Council militia and the Janjaweed, which everybody knows the history. There were 650 rape cases that took place. There were also the people who have been murdered, which are believed to be above 100, more than 100 people. 40 of them were thrown into the Nile River. I think hundreds of arrestees, terrorizing families. All these were atrocities carried out by the security men from Transitional Military Council and the Janjaweed under the name of Rapid Support Forces. I think this has to be held accountable because in Africa, the problem we have, somebody comes into a situation, carries out massacres, and gets away with it. What is happening? People will say, let us look the man, Omar al-Bashir himself. He came into the power 1989, a year after, whether he was behind it or didn't know it, and some people also blame Hassan al-Turabi, Osama bin Laden was invited into Sudan. And soon after that happened, America got angry and they listed Sudan, put the name of Sudan into the list of terrorist sponsors. But after 17 years of a period, things changed. During the Barack Obama's regime, the President of the United States have lifted the sanctions, many elements of the sanctions. He also freed the assets frozen by the United States. And within the same year, 2017, came Trump. In October, he lifted the remaining sanctions. You can understand from these two actions that Umar was allying himself, policing the United States in terms of meeting their foreign policy agenda. One of the things that happened was there was a corruption. Millions of dollars were found in his own yard. There was an embezzlement. One thing that has been mentioned by the people who spoke before me that is affecting all of us in the region is the endless intervention of the United Arab Emirates in our regions. They are favoring the military to be in power so that they could use what my colleague has described as slave soldiers to keep their fights against the Houthis in Yemen.
Who knew the United Arab Emirates would ever loom so large? There's much more of this after the break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, for Mayadeen television, coming from London, talking about the Sudan. Earlier, we took the كلمة camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Let's take a look.
Do you think there are any external motivations behind the unrest in Sudan?
Well, I guess there's a couple. I guess there's some civilian unrest and then political unrest. I think there'd be an issue if the people don't get their voices heard because they're the ones ultimately who should have the say in their country. And
I think behind any conflict in the world there is many interests.
I mean, there are always powerful people around the world who, control everything we do. I mean, even you standing now in this country, so it could be it could be anyone.
I think it is the military, because they are conflicting with the civilian.
I believe there's a lot of external activity happening in a lot of areas, and I believe that people are being confused by the rationality of the government and the people. Sudan needs to take back their power and push out all this external help that's coming from maybe the superpowers.
Do you think the recent coup in Sudan has anything to do with the standoff between the US, China, other world powers such as Saudi Arabia and so on?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Because if we look for Sudan, Sudan has not enough power to maintain the conflict for long years. So there is some powers behind them, behind the politics.
Yeah, I guess Central Africa is a pretty unstable area at the moment. There's huge economic, I guess, gains to get by getting a kind of a foothold in the region. It's probably one of those things where it's not the decisions aren't being made for the people. It's kind of being made with an economic motive.
I think there is a lot of oil and a lot of precious things that maybe other people want to get.
Well, right now it's all about money, and Central Africa is where the money's at. Well, should I say the resources? And control of the resources is control of power. And I believe all the superpowers are trying to do their best to get their hands on it first, because it's first come, first serve. So definitely.
It's all basically because of the natural resources that Sudan has. So basically, America, China, Russia, they just wanted to get those natural resources and have it on their own.
Some clever people on the streets of London there. Yes, let's take the gentleman in the middle.
Yes, good evening. My name is Sadiq Osman. I'm a member of the Popular Congress in Sudan. I totally agree with the brother from South Sudan and the brother there who said our elements of our political system, some of them are proxies from outside. I would say our whole political system is being created by the same power that colonized Sudan before. Before they left, they make sure that they have their leaders, that we have the same political setup, and we never have the chance to sit down and do our own social, economic, political settlement. The last regime just developed what he got from older regimes. The war in Darfur didn't broke during the Omar Bashir only. That's a lie, because this system is been going on since the 60s. Some of our political parties were arming tribes in Darfur openly, and that's been known for so long. Omar Bashir developed the system, developed this social development, and he used these people to fight against the uprising that's calling for a just federal system in the center. And what we're seeing now, let me tell you something. The same day the army came to aside themselves with the revolution, with the uprising in Sudan, which is the 11th of April, the same day, 5 of the political leaders of the so-called freedom and change were summoned to Abu Dhabi. To do what? To do what? One of them came out of that meeting. He wrote very clear, there is now a regional power that have no interest in democracy in the region. But this regional power have a very clear mandate against the political Islam. And we as leaders should align ourselves without any reservation with that regional power. Unfortunately, he's my friend. He's a very close friend to mine, and we used talking, and immediately I text him. The minute I read what he wrote, I text him, I can't believe you're saying this. He said, what's wrong with it? I said, everything is wrong with it. You aligning with yourself with an international or regional power against your local national opponent. How is that democratic? What are you talking about? You are just another hypocrite. You're fighting for decades for something. When it came, you don't want to grab it. You're going outside to seek alliance with other people who have no interest in your country, who have no interest in democracy. You are just another dictator. You are just another Bashir for me. So what is happening now, we have to sit down and realize there is a big social development in Sudan happening in Darfur, happening in the center. The people who went out in the street, and this uprising is the new generation. This new generation was never there before. Why? Because the old system didn't want the people to have enough education and enough knowledge. And they kept us with 2 or 3 universities in the whole Sudan. Now, there are like tens of universities in Sudan, and this is the product. The new product, the new social development, if we don't address it morally, if we don't address it politically, and if we don't address it wisely, we're going to go into a full-scale civil war. The same war we launched against the South, the same war we launched before against Darfur, is just being now centralized in Khartoum.
Very interesting. Let's take the gentleman in the front row.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Abdullah Hirat. I'm the president of Somali National Council. I would like to highlight some the key issues about Sudan and the regional players. We hearing like all the time Emirates involvement, Saudi Arabia's involvement, and also militias, which is not under the control of the government, and we don't know who they are, who support them financially. So since the invasion of Iraq, we had a company called Blackwater, led by Eric Prince. The world known since the massacre of Tahrir Square in Baghdad. That is when they come out. Since then, they started organizing a lot of political chaos in the region, and they most of the time trying to integrate within the revolutionists or within the governments. So what is happening in Sudan is what had happened in Somalia. What we would advise is, number one, to reorganize yourselves. Rely on the Sudanese only, even if he is a dictator or non-dictator. What is in between, it is disastrous, and I'm sure they will pay the price if the Sudanese people don't be aware of this kind of involvement, because the American and Britain, they, especially America, launched war on democracy. They are playing a game to rule the whole world, to colonize the world in a very smart way, sending their spies to lead those countries, like what's happening like Somalia at the moment, what had happened in Libya, what's happening in Iraq. They creating problems. Look what's had happened in Syria. They creating problem, and then they try to get way to invade those countries and to send their boys to lead those nations. This kind of terrorism, we are fighting Somalia. You heard Al-Shabaab. I know every single leader in Al-Shabaab, where they born, how they started, how they are, who's supporting them, who financially giving this, chemicals. Even Somali government cannot have the license to, import those kind of chemicals to create this kind of bombs. So what we're trying to, say is like, whenever we hear Emirates, Saudi Arabia, they cannot even put their hands up if the America or Britain wants to, for them to do it.
Very interesting. So let's take the lady here in the middle.
Hi, my name is Rania, and I am Sudanese living in UK, in London. I think I agree with almost everyone in that what's happening in the region or in Africa has a an international interference. And with regards to Sudan, I think the direct evidence for that is Russia and China taking the veto against UN involvement in taking peace. The gentleman here pointed out about the massacre on the 3rd of June, and that was something. I mean, in the social media alone, almost everyone was taking interest in what's happening, because this is beyond what human being could think about. But then what we found is that Russia and China, they just vetoed out this decision that the UN could get involved. So I think I totally agree that the international interference is what's going on, and the way for the international interference is that they have to have someone whom they can move around, and if the people took over, that's what we want in Sudan, is a civilian government, then that would be the people's wish, and that's against the international interest. And this is why...
Why then do you have faith in the United Nations?
Why do we have faith in...
What would be good about United Nations involvement in Sudan?
Well, for the time being, I think what we're clearly fighting now is the United Arab and the Saudi Arabia and Egypt, which these countries have direct involvement. So clearly, we don't want these involvement. The UN, they have, even if it's decision, a pressure from the UN, someone collectively, they should have something against those countries. So what's happening now, it's the people, there is unequal forces. It's the people against the Transitional Military Council with the Janjaweed, who are they're giving extreme, they're using live ammunitions, they're doing, what they're doing is horrific. So people alone could not really fight them.
Okay, let's take the gentleman at the front.
My name is Tuali Yusuf. I'm TV presenter and also I represent the Gashan organization. I would like to say two things, my brothers of Sudan. Somalia had almost 30 years of division. We had a foreign intervention, including the United States. The United States came to Somalia 1992 and left with empty hands and civilian deaths more than 10,000 of Somalia, in Mogadishu in particular. And the Arabs have been intervening in our country, nothing they have done. So I would like to warn all Sudanese people, those who live abroad and those who live inside the country, unless you sit together and work together, nobody is going to help you. Don't think international community has anything to do, whether they have a peace or not. If you have anything anymore, get involved now. Don't let any people to take care of your country. And if you don't do this, you will end up like Somalia. And never let anybody to intervene in your country, like us. We talk about Saudi Arabia, we talk about Emirates. Unless you allow them to get involved, they won't be able to come. We don't get involved in Saudi politics or their life.
There's no politics there.
How could they? Yes.
Let's take the lady behind you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Mohammed, and I live in London. So just, I'm very sympathetic with the Sudanese people. I could feel the pain we go through. I'm from Somalia originally, so what I was just trying to say is international, don't expect the international to sort out your problems, first of all. Other thing is they have to think about it. What kind of democracy do you want? Because when you say democracy in Western, it's different, the one in Africa, actually. So they could say something democracy and it will end up something different. The people don't wish.
That happens here too.
Other thing is, do they trust the different groups of opposition right now? The people of Sudan, can they trust those people to come together and talk and find a way forward to build a civilian government? That is the main question, actually. Because now you're opposition and yeah, they want to do this and that, but when they come to the government, it could be different and it could be outside players, so can influence. But they have to think and really, can they do this?
Gentleman right at the back.
Hello, Mr. غالاوي. Thank you for having me. My name is Ayman Osman. I'm a medical doctor. I would like to disagree with two of the gentlemen here. The gentleman in the front has said that the demonstrations started because of austerity measures, and I would like to say this may partly be true, but the opposition to this government has been going since their military coup in June 1989. A lot of people died, including, and I can remember, Dr. Ali Fadul from the Sudan Doctors Union, and 28th of Ramadan, where a lot of people and generals from the military died, including Shahid Abdul Munim Khmer. It's going on, all the people who battled the previous government, going through Darfur war and demonstration in 2013. So it's been a battle. And unfortunately, the international community again has failed us, because they were only supporting the previous government because they had interest in that government. I would like also to say to the gentleman there that, yes, we were ex-colonies, but I don't believe that we are still controlled by big countries like USA, UK. If we want to progress, we can do that. USA, as you always like to say, Mr. غالاوي, that they don't have to control the crime rate in Manhattan. So if we are strong, we will win. Yes, there is a lot of pressure coming from UAE, KSA, and Egypt. This is fighting by proxy for America, and which were controlled by the Zionist. So it is a big game.
Well, you call it pressure, but what you really mean is money.
Money, yes.
So,
yes.
Because the United Arab Emirates has no power to give pressure, they only have money to bribe people. The gentleman at the front.
My name is Turan Basri, political activist and a member of the Labour Party. Listening to people's views here and stories, it's very evident what the answer is. The people themselves have to solve their problem. However, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but it's quite evident that external powers, since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, we've had constant conflict in North Africa, the Horn of Africa, Middle East. It's almost as if the outside powers are causing constant conflict there. And I think that change will not come until change comes within the colonial countries, the colonists to begin with. We see it in Brazil, where they can quite openly change a government at will. Most of the wealth of Africa is actually outside of Africa, and that should be for the people of Africa. Africa is still colonised, but it's done economically.
Sure, I must say I strongly disagree with that. If you wait for change in the colonising countries, you'll wait forever. I go back to my scorpion analogy. There will always be scorpions in the imperialist countries. But it's within the power of the people of Africa to take control of their own destiny. And there are countries in the world, I give you one, Cuba, for example, which rose and overthrew colonialism and has maintained its independence in the teeth of all efforts to destroy it for well over half a century.
But that was with the support of Russia.
Yeah, of course.
So
and Sudan, the Sudan people can look abroad for support. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba did not collapse because the Cuban people themselves had been revolutionized. Correct. But if you're going to call it a revolution, it has to really be a revolution, not just using these kind of words. Who hasn't spoken and wants to? Gentleman at the end.
Some disagreement with that. The history of socialism really goes back to the modern history of socialism. Goes back to the Russian Revolution, and the aspiration of the Russian Revolution was world revolution, and the aspiration for world revolution really does mean that you can't kill the monster anywhere except at its head. So it is the working class of the United States and Britain and France that must do the task of defeating imperialism. The single dominant global hegemonic imperialism is the United States of America. It rules the entire world. Its army is bigger, its navy is bigger. That is the enemy of all mankind. That is the central enemy of all mankind. What it does in Africa, it uses its proxies. For instance, South Sudan. Why did the conflict begin in South Sudan? Because South Sudan has the oil, isn't it? It's oil, right? The conflict is about oil, and you. In Rwanda, well, what was the conflict about? Well, now in Rwanda they speak English and no longer French. A victory for the United States of America, you would say. The United States is moving into Africa, and it's moving into Africa, and it's funding its proxy forces.
The girl behind.
I'm Aram Osman. I'm an A-level student, and I'm also Sudanese. I think I agree with most of the points that have been brought up by other people, in the sense that the Sudanese people need to be the ones that provide the change. It's not, we can't rely on outside forces because they don't know what they don't know what it's like to live in Sudan and what we need. The culture in Sudan is so much different, and you can go anywhere, anytime in Sudan and ask anyone for anything that you need, and they will give it to you straight away because they are kind and caring. And I commend everyone in Sudan for keeping the protests peaceful despite violent action taken upon them. But in regards to your question from earlier, why do we have faith in the UN? We still need support from outside forces to say what's going on is wrong. We don't need them to change it for us. We just need other people to condemn it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to stop any tendency towards believing that will happen.
Understood.
You're right to demand it. You have a right to it.
But without demanding it, it won't come. Regardless
happen.
of whether it comes or not, you need to demand it.
Demanding it is fine. And appeal to the people. I just make the point en passant before the last comment, I'm afraid. The people of Iran overthrew the mighty Shah, and for 40 years have maintained a revolutionary country in control of its own affairs. It is possible to do it, but you have to be determined to do it, and you have to be smart enough to do it. Last speaker, the gentleman in the brown jacket. Go ahead, sir.
Right, so yes, talking about this in United Nations, I think the starkest example we have is Palestine. How many orders have been taken out? Nothing has been implemented on the ground. Coming to Sudan, I think that there's an important point I want to address, is because we're sitting here in a platform, in a media, in a Western media, we're not on the ground. I need to talk about the topic on the ground. There is a real problem. The problem is, if you want to walk out of such a situation, dire situation, is there needs to be a united front leadership with a certain mindset. And that, unfortunately, is not available. And the problem we have is the heritage of the Sudanese people, for example, mostly, at least we're talking about this North, Arab, Muslim, etc. Now, the issue is this government specifically, which was in place, the previous one, which is the military council still trying to preserve and has links to, is, they called so Islamic sort of government. They call for that, which is the heritage of the people of the country. And a lot of people got fooled. And they believed them, and that was the problem. And they gave the worst example ever about this great religion called Islam. I mean, the same what we saw of like ISIS example and all of that. And that is a big issue. That's why we now have a lot of people as well calling for, let's have complete secularism. If you got nothing to do with Islam, I don't want to talk to you. And there is communist people as well. And there is people from, siding by the military. So you have all these different factions. How are you going to unite all these people and have one? And this is where I wanted to point people's attention. There's a trick in the media, which is this dilemma. They say, George, you want tea or coffee? Well, I like chocolate. Isn't there a third option? When they went to, when Blair Bush wanted to go to Iraq, they were told, do you want Saddam, stay under Saddam, or do you want Americans to help you? Well, isn't there a third option? Why don't the people take their own hands, things into their own hands? So the same thing is being told now in Sudan. They're saying to them, do you want to remain with the hypocrite Islamic, party and the military, or do you want, let's get help from the outside? Well, why is these the two only options? There should be a third option, which is we need to go back to our heritage, and this heritage that has been smeared, which is what they call Islamic and this and ISIS, we as Muslims deeply know it, and we know what our Prophet Muhammad did in names of Islam, of real justice. We have a heritage, we have a complete system that can solve our problems, nothing to do with hypocrisy or injustice or anything, and that's what we need to go and search for.
Well done. Unfortunately, because we could have kept this going literally all night, but we've run out of time. I'm going to close the debate now and thank you all for participating. And this is an argument that will run and run. I've been George Galloway. This has been كلمة on Al Mayadeen television. Thank you.